All right, we are live on YouTube. If you want to show your face, turn on the video, otherwise keep it off. Did Levi ever come back? It doesn't look like it. Oh well.
Yeah.
Well, we're waiting for the last few people to straggle in. Got a few more minutes. What are people working on?
This and that.
I'm redoing an old program, the weekend programming bot that gets the files from PRX, and I'm just making because I kind of scattered the data all over the place, so it's kind of biting me right now because we're doing programming changes. So I'm just redoing it with basically all the data in one place and using data classes and stuff.
Nice. So you're kind of being forced to refactor what you've got.
Yeah, I mean, I could probably get by for now, but there's more programming changes, so I might as well just do it and save myself a headache later on.
Yeah, I haven't been doing any Python, but just trying to blow up a high voltage power supply that I got in.
Whoa, what are you hooking up to that?
I just have it in running at some really large resistors right now. It's an evaluation board, just seeing if it will, how long it will last before it burns up. The last one only lasts about 30 minutes. This one's been going can go for 2 hours and my battery dies that is supplying it. So
All right.
it's a fun little project.
Is it intended for something other than just testing tolerances, or?
Yeah, I have a project in mind. I do the portable radio stuff up on mountains, and I'm thinking about building a tube version of real small
and here
radios.
comes that spectacular finish. Watch this. Oh, are you sure?
I guess I'll have a fantastic finish on the power supply.
Yeah. Are you sure though?
I'm sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, it is 7:10. We've got 8 people here. That's enough of a crowd, right, Taneem?
Probably. Yeah, I think we're good.
You can perform. That's not like below your tolerances. All right.
It's fine.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to another edition of SacPy. We've now been online for, I think, 19 episodes now. At this point, it's been pretty fun. Delta variant seems to be keeping us from going back in person anytime soon. So That'll happen at some point, but yeah, we'll wait a little bit longer. August 5th. All hail our glorious founder, Josh Miller. He started SacPy circa 2017. And he kind of hot potatoed it to me back at the beginning of 2020. Quick, think fast. I'm leaving. It's been fun though. All right, we've got chat channels. Those work if people want to take a screenshot or something. You may have seen me message you in the Slack or the Discord today. I hope you join up. People are usually pretty active, talking about one thing or the other. We're also in a number of other channels. Follow us on Twitter. That sometimes gets used. Subreddit. Well, we've got one in there. Post things occasionally. Yeah, not really Zoom links, so that's how you get Zoom bombed. We also have a Facebook group and a Facebook page. Join up, we'll get you in there. I think the Facebook group you have to be let in, but anyone can watch the Facebook page. And check us out. The community. Let's see. Should we get any? I feel like we've gotten pretty much all these same photos, so we're good on this one. But it's been fun having all you guys come in via Zoom. It's been really neat to see how things grow. It's also been a lot easier to set up. But so this month, we're going to be going over producing documentation using a library called Sphinx. Taneem is back once again to lay on us some Python knowledge.
Yeah.
Pretty neat. I will pass things off to him. I believe you should be able to share. Looks like it. Nope. All participants. There we go.
Yeah, let me start. Let's see if I can start sharing. Start the share. Oh, great. It's letting me do that. I'll do this. What else? There's the Google Chrome. Yep, this and that, and maybe that one here. Okay. So let's start. Let's do it to it. Okay. So you guys see this, green page, right? Sphinx deploying your project. Why not? All right. So there's going to be.
For the U.S. Blake Peroni is on the anchor for the United States.
Wait, what's going on here? Okay. I guess somebody had their TV on. So, like all my.
Sorry, new choice.
All right. Like all my presentations, it's going to be very informal. I don't have to go through everything. If you've got a question or a diversion or anything like that, we can just stop and talk about that. And I'm not going to go into the big details of Sphinx. I just thought I'd illuminate how I use it in practice in my work and maybe give you guys ideas on using it in your work too. So, little cheeky intro. It's an open secret if you've done any sort of software engineering for any amount of time, is code and process documentation is shit. And in the absence of documentation, if you're able to get a solution, the only way to do it is just random walk. And at least for me, just being angry all the time. It's just...
What's he saying? What the?
Yeah, so maybe there's a better way. And the idea is Sphinx is a pretty good solution I found in practice to document my tool in a way that, basically making the documentation isn't too hard, and then using Sphinx to create something that's really polished. So the idea I have is just, to pay it forward. I've got some code, some API I want to document, and I want other people to use it, and I don't want to make their, lives really hard. And so for that reason, I've started to do a lot of my process and code documentation in Sphinx. So, there's the blurb from the website, and if people want, I can give you guys or have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. This is actually Keynote right here, but a PowerPoint version of it that has all these links for you all to try. So the executive summary, I guess the thing that gets money or attention at conferences, a tool that makes it easy, to create intelligent and beautiful documentation written by blah, 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 and licensed under the BSD license. And, I'll be honest, I put in stars for sufficiently not insane values of easy, I would say. I mean, it's easier than the alternatives. So, I mean, you can always just use text, but then, or make the raw HTML yourself, but that's way too hard to do. And the main way to make Sphinx documentation, a Sphinx documented website, is through a markup language called restructured text. So if any of you have some kind of academic background, another good example of a markup language is LaTeX. The most well-known markup language right now for documentation is Markdown. In fact, Markdown was created because restructured text was a bit too hard to understand. The learning curve was a bit steeper. But the nice thing about restructured text is it's got a very, very frozen, rigid, expressive specification, and you can do a lot of stuff with it. And with Markdown, it's a problem of which version of Markdown are you referring to. There's GitHub's, there's Microsoft's, I think there's the original Markdown, this and that. And the idea is the big value add that I also see, it doesn't just look nice, but it also has a polished index searchable website. And I'm gonna click on that link here. So this is what I mean. This is just an example of one of my Sphinx documented websites. So get TV. Okay. So can you guys see? Ooh, get TV. Ah. Looks like yep.
Yeah, you can probably zoom the text in a little.
Okay. See? Does it look a little better now?
Yeah, it's better.
So you can put in something in your search box, and Sphinx will also has some JavaScript in there that contains, I guess, a searchable database. As I say, I'm not an HTML, CSS guy, but Sphinx seems to just do a lot of this out of the box. And there you go, see? You can do crap like this.
That's like default read the docs formatting, right?
That's right. Actually, yes, this is the read the docs style of Sphinx. I guess you could theme, the read the docs theme of Sphinx, which I think is one of the more popular ones. Another popular one is called Alabaster, but I just happen to like this, layout, flow, and color scheme a little better. That's why that's sort of the default on the any Sphinx documented websites that I have. All right. So, I'm busy with my day job or jobs, and so I'm not preparing for a conference. I didn't have a lot of time to prepare this talk. So it's going to be lazy. So the idea is, here's sort of examples, here's sort of where to start looking. And really that's about it. The idea, I think, for people who want to do deeper dives is to go, maybe start from this presentation, go to the websites that I, describe here, and, dig into sort of what I've introduced in this presentation, so that you'll have an idea of how to, generate this fancy looking documentation yourself. And so there are like three main sections that I have. I'll start off with, I guess, the Sphinx directory structure. That is, you have basically code that markup to document, both your processes and the code. I'll give you some examples of its functionality, like, okay, some slides demonstrating what you can do in Sphinx with the websites that I have. I think the third point, it's not really even discussed a lot elsewhere when people talk about how to use Sphinx, is how to deploy it. So of course the idea is you deploy it somewhere so that, this website you create doesn't cost you any personal bandwidth or space. That's somebody else's problem. And I'm a huge fan of the let somebody else pay for it / deal with it. And so I'll tell you, there's 4 ways, but I'm going to just describe how to summarize how to deploy to GitHub pages. Ooh, hello, can everybody hear me?
Still coming through.
Zoom is doing crappy stuff, like it says, oh, I'm going to switch to this other microphone source that doesn't work. Oh, actually, my bad, I'll move back. Okay, that's why I asked, can you guys hear me? Okay. So there are 3 main projects. Actually, all the examples I'm giving you, as well as the demonstration of blah-de-blah, comes from these 3 things. And I get to click on them because we're going to just go through it, at least snippets of them as I go through this presentation. So with that, is everybody good? Anybody have any questions or things they want to talk about? Has anybody been exposed to Sphinx before?
Oh man, my dad was a Sphinx.
Lots of riddles, huh?
Oh,
And
always.
penalty is death, yes. Well,
Okay.
Sphinx documentation is typically not that bad, but yeah. So I'll just go quickly through this directory structure. It looks complicated, but it really isn't. You've got a top level directory in which all your Sphinx stuff lives. You have the MAKEFILE, which is a GNU MAKEFILE, a make script to build stuff. The code lives in the source directory by default. And when you do a make HTML, it builds stuff into your build HTML directory. And if you go into build HTML, it's an actual, website, locally created website that you can go into. So has anybody ever used Makefiles before? James, how about yourself? Oh, you've never used it. Okay, yeah, it's sort of the, okay, you want to build something. And this is back in the day before, I don't know, there's stuff like Rake and Scones, and of course, VS Code does the stuff sort of under the hood. That is, you press a button and stuff generates. Well, back in the day before any of that stuff, back when Emacs and Vim were king, because there wasn't anything else, you'd have a bunch of code before even there was Git, and probably even before SVN. I guess CBS was around then, but Make predates that. You'd have something called a Makefile, and program on your Linux or Unix machine called Make. And then what you do is in this Makefile, it would tell you, okay, you'd have some actions. And it's a very arcane script, so I don't even know lots of the stuff. But the idea is, you see the thing before the colon? That's basically saying make, do something, and it will look for either this file directory, or previous even kind of build. You can even chain your build dependencies with each other, right? That's what this HTML here is. And it'll just do all these things. And this, I guess ampersand, I guess there's multiple ways to build it. But the idea is, HTML, make HTML will build basically the website, HTML, CSS, JavaScript code, all in there. Let's see if this here, I guess, all the code examples, I decided because, yes, I am lazy and I don't want to flip around a lot, is all these images that I have, in my presentation are interactive. That is, you can click on them and it will either launch a website or it'll open up GitHub and show you, highlight the lines of code to which it refers to. So I figure instead of saying, oh, look at this, or do, basically do multiple steps to show where the code is, like, oh yeah, git clone blah, and then open this file. I figure it's just easier to have that, operation, the same data you can get to by just clicking on the images. So I guess another reason to do stuff like that. Here's basically all what I talked about before. You run make HTML in that directory where the Makefile lives, and it'll create basically this thing. And you could just open it up. You see the URL here. Let's see. Oh, it doesn't work. I guess I never fixed this. Ooh, let me just go back. And let me tell you what I mean here. Can everybody, oh, sorry, wrong. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Can everybody see this? This shell that I have?
Yeah, could you zoom that one in?
Yeah. So you see, I'm just going to go through this process again because I trust what I've done so much. I'll just delete the built directory. It's doing all this crap. See. The HTML pages are in build HTML. And I can do this because I'm running, I guess, Mac. I don't know if it's possible on other, operating systems. And voila, you guys see that there? This website. This is a good way for you to also check, does it actually generate properly before you deploy it? And you see the URL, it's referring to, location on your disk. And I guess you'll have to trust me that all this, it generated mostly properly. All right. Any questions? Anything people want to talk about in some more detail?
So once you've got all the HTML made, then it's just, it's in your GitHub repo, and then you push it and all that.
Well, right. It's built into build HTML, right? And then there was a make action. It turns out you do a make deploy the way I showed it here in the Makefile. And the way it does it is it, actually at that point deploys it to GitHub. Copies over the
Oh yeah, okay, I see that. Yeah. Wow. Cool.
There's probably better ways to do it, but you know, I'm a big fan of the quick and dirty and understandable. And I understood it, and so it works. And more importantly, if it fails in a acceptable way, at least to me. And so at that point, you know, yeah, I'm good to go. Now, these are sort of the essential elements. Okay, you need to have these things. Otherwise, if you don't have them, you know, Sphinx won't generate the website. So one thing you definitely need is a CONF.PY, which is, you know, it is Python. You could think of it as a little Python module that contains your Sphinx configuration. So let's click here, let's see. So you see, there's, you know, just some stuff. It's kind of a detail, but, you know, there's a little bit of bespoke code, a little bit of stuff that maybe is not really obvious. This bit of code is sort of a where you at. This basically says, okay, I actually also want to expose, you know, the API documentation, which lives as things called doc strings. And I'm going to show that to you guys a little later. And I want to be able to find those and also, you know, show them on the website. This tells, you know, Sphinx, you know, that where they're located. It turns out this is just a Pythonic way of saying, you know, this is 2 levels above where CONF.PY is, and that's where you start from there to look for the API documentation of the Python code. So let me just click on that again. You see, this is what can you guys see this? This might be a little hard to see, but this is the actual, you know, bit of code I have, just, you know, shown on GitHub where this crap is located.
Yeah, it's a little small. You could probably zoom it in a little further.
A little more? Do you see that fine? How about now?
Yeah, that's great. Nice.
Yeah, it's you know, I found in practice, it's basically saying, you know, don't look in this directory because that's not where the code is. Look 2 levels above because that's where, you know, found that to look at the code. Actually, yeah, that's this, I think, you don't technically need to have this in here, but it's sort of, so you see this thing called extensions, right? This is the thing that makes, for instance, all the good stuff up here, at least in the examples that I'm going to show. And let me just go through it a little bit. You see this thing called MathJax. So it turns out MathJax is a basically JavaScript module that allows you to display LaTeX style math. You know, just all those fancy looking symbols and things like that. It turns out that Sphinx can, if you have the appropriate LaTeX type code in restructured text, which I'm going to show, this module or this extension allows Sphinx to generate that. There's other stuff that says, okay, number your figures. InterSphinx is a really cute one. The nice thing about Sphinx is it not only can document and reference your code, it can, with InterSphinx, it could even document and reference external code. So for instance, NumPy arrays, I find in practice, at least at work, a lot refers to a, you know, Python scientific module called SacPy. And so I say, okay, I'm using this interpolation module with InterSphinx to refer to, you know, these external classes that I don't control, but for which I have information to generate this documentation. This stuff, this is a kind of neat one. I don't use it too often, but I thought it's a neat thing to have. Is this allows you to actually deploy clips into your Sphinx documentation. So if you have, I think I showed something like this probably a year ago when I was describing NPR stuff. That was an example of Sphinx documentation with YouTube clips. But I'm going to go through it a little more again. Let's go through that. And this looks like a lot of noise, right? This is basically saying, this is the prescription saying, okay, you want to be able to document, all, functionality in these different modules, like the request module or the Python, standard library. Well, point to this location and there'll be an object inventory that Sphinx will, try to get to basically allow you to document stuff in these, I guess, separate projects. So all this stuff. I just figure, since I do a lot of, external code documentation, in addition to internal code documentation, this is something I tend to use all the time. And the final thing, at the level of, you need at least this thing by default. Otherwise, nothing will generate. And this is just a symbol of the code. It's just the index.rst means basically the top of your website, Sphinx website. And everything is located, relative to or underneath that. And this is just an example of what I'm talking about. All right, that was a bit of a core dump. And I haven't even talked about really any kind of examples, but yeah, that's sort of where you're starting. And anything to say, Woody, or anybody else?
Well, I'd say that definitely looks like a great example of the boring stuff to be automated.
Yes.
It's basically, if I understand it, it's taking the comments that you've made in your code and making it into a website.
Yep, that's a big part of it.
Right. So then
And
someone who downloads your module or whatever can
yeah,
have their instructions. That's really cool.
that's right. And in fact, my code also has an object inventory. So in principle, somebody can, go to, have something equivalent for, call it Howdy or NPR stuff with the, full URL, and also, basically refer to my code in the same fashion. And in pink, I'm not going to go through it because it's a lot of crap. And it's sort of extra stuff is, the rest of the code. This is basically everything, all the, things that go into a website, is in the pink. I guess I should have left the CONF.PY out because I talked about that before. So here's just a few examples. I'll just go through maybe 3 of them. And if you guys have the energy, I can probably stop on the 3rd one. We can just take a
If you're on a roll, go for it.
All right. So I sort of went through this here, right? Click on this. Was it COVID-19? Let me go back because I don't remember. COVID-19 update, right? Here we go. This is my COVID-19 stats, and you see, this is like a killer feature for me, is that you can, just it's got a pretty snazzy search functionality in there, and it'll tell you, oh, you don't quite remember it. Okay, here it is, and all this wonderful stuff. At least I find it very wonderful, especially when I'm confused about somebody else's code. Oop, let me go back. I thought here's it's kind of hard to see, so I'm going to first you see the Sphinx docs with animation. I'm going to click on the title. That'll actually go to the website. And you see all this thing, movie cases deaths mode.
Yeah.
How do I make it smaller? Okay, I'm going to make it smaller because I want to see. This is the idea of you can put in animations into your Sphinx documentation. In this case, what I'm showing you is, what is it? Oh yeah, animated GIFs. So that's what you're seeing here. Oh, sorry about this if I'm going too quickly. So kind of depressing. This is the New York City, you know, cumulative number of COVID-19 cases, big numbers everywhere, but you know, you started off sometime in, you know, March 2020 and just gets progressively worse. And similarly, I guess there's more action happening here. And I've talked about stuff like this before, you know, in other SacPy and I think even PyRVA meetups about the COVID-19, you know, stats module that has all this functionality that I developed. And okay, I'm going to go back, and this is going to be a bit of a deep dive. You see all this code, you saw that website, right?
Yeah.
And this is an example of, this is the actual Sphinx code that was used to generate it. You know, this is the, you know, you saw that green thing that was, you know, the help menu, or, you know, the help syntax. That's, you know, in this block here. This is, you know, basically an unstructured list. I know it's sort of a, so I'm going to go back a little bit. I think I'm just going to, so you see it says figure 3.6 and figure 3.7. This is Sphinx ability to, you know, actually do numbered references by, you know, identifiable references to figures and tables and what have you. Here's the, you know, basically reference. Here's the label of various images. In this case, it's an animated GIF. Like, okay, this is a figure, and you saw that the figure, right, has a label, a label associated with it, and the caption. And of course, you can refer to other things, you know, wherever else. And let's see, I think, yeah, that's sort of a example one. Now, I've talked about, you know, something like this before. I think it was probably 2 or 3 months ago, where I described the COVID-19 stats functionality, where I referred to the documentation in the presentation. So the thing I'm demonstrating here is the you can actually have documentation in your API. That is in your .py file. You have code documentation, and Sphinx is able to consume and also put it onto the website. So this is referring to, you see this API documentation, you know, basically it's fully qualified, you know, path of the method. And you see here, rather than being animated GIFs, these are MP4 files. GitHub is pretty permissive. Well, it depends on, you have to sort of trial and error your way through permissions on what it allows and what it forbids. And similarly here, yes. So this is, you see this thing called get incident data, some kind of arrow here. This is an example of a, you know, code reference. That is, you can have, you know, refer to code, you know, methods, attributes, classes, modules in Sphinx itself. Now I'll just open that up. And this is just an example. Yeah, I'm not going to go into the deepest dive. And you see this thing called str. This is just a way of, you know, using inner Sphinx and Python's basically standard library to refer to, okay, what is. And head caving in deep dive. You saw basically the website, right? And I'm clicking on the image, and this is for the benefit of people who want to do a deep dive. This is the actual code to that describes, you know, all the stuff you saw. This is basically a way of saying, okay, here's a reference or a substitution script. This is a bit of a deep dive. It's sort of like more intermediate to advanced restructured text. This is a substitution that's basically saying, okay, what is that substitution? It's anybody sort of more conversant with HTML? I guess this is a bit of HTML5 in here. Can anybody chime in on that? I think it's HTML5 code.
Yes, it is.
Sure.
Refer to, you know, I guess raw HTML code, and that's what's happening. This is a, you know, an animated MP4 file that you can control. I think, right? I guess,
Yes,
Charter?
yes, it is.
Okay. And so you can do stuff like that in Sphinx. All right. Any more questions? I know I've gone through a lot of stuff, but it's sort of a fairly straightforward way of, at least I find, of you've got to know where to start, and then at that point, it's pretty straightforward, I should say, to do stuff like this and that. This thing, not too many people do because it's kind of a stunt, but I like it. I mentioned LaTeX. Well, this is sort of a, this is, I guess you would call it a hypocrite commit. That is this section 8 in the NPR stuff repo or the NPR stuff documentation called My Philosophy of Driving. It has no real relevance to any of the functionality in this repo about, okay, using these tools that I've developed, like auto cropping images and things like that. It's like, what the fuck is, you know, driving, you know, like uncomfortable have to do with any of this? I just put it in here because, you know, I wrote it up someplace else, but as you can see here, you see all this sort of nice looking math formulas, right? That's an example of, you know, even in Sphinx, you can, you know, deploy your, you know, math script or math formulas into your Sphinx documentation. Yeah, this is all this, it's crap, actually, yeah, all this stuff. Another figure, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to go back. I'm not going to go into a big deep dive, but I'll just say in that part of the code, right, that you saw on the, in the presentation, this is the actual, basically restructured text code to display those formulae. And
It's markup.
yeah, in fact, this is, has anybody ever been exposed to LaTeX before?
Isn't it pronounced latex?
It doesn't matter. I don't know. GIF or GIF, you know, who the hell knows? LaTeX, latex, LT, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. But yeah, exactly.
When you call it latex, it's more tactile, right?
I guess it is. I don't know. Yeah. But this is all LaTeX or latex markup. And those are the formulas that you know, yes, up here. First, where is it? Yeah, up there. But yeah, if you go through this justifies in a, at least to me, a relaxing, but to others, especially those driving behind me, and relatively infuriating how I choose to go 15 miles per hour through, you know, curves. If I'm taking a left or right onto, you know, a perpendicular road, I'll go through it at 15 miles per hour, that sort of thing.
We're 15 miles an hour in LA. How do you get so fast?
15. So the radius of curvature is 60 feet, right? It's 15 miles per hour. So that means the acceleration, the centripetal acceleration is 5.5 miles per hour per second. So I figured that's a nice metric to have. It turns out if the linear acceleration and deceleration, right? Your stopping distance, if you're going 15 miles per hour, is 30 feet. And if you're going 30 miles per hour, is 120 feet. So sort of nice numbers to handle. At least nice. But yes, this is I want to be clear. This is just a demonstration of, LaTeX mathematical formula in my Sphinx website. This chapter has no relevance to anything there. And YouTube clips. So there was that extension I showed, something sphinxcontrib.youtube. Let's just go through it. This is this. I don't know what's happening. I guess you can make it full screen and it'll go through it. Yeah, it doesn't look like a really, I don't know. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, it made it look nicer. But yes, there's a YouTube, I think it's public, where I describe how to, use account Howdy Music songs on Howdy_music_ to get YouTube clips. If you want a song by artist and song title, you specify it, and it'll get the song from YouTube, the M4A file from YouTube, and the metadata, the music metadata from these other servers like Grace Note, Last.fm, and Music Brains. So, yep. I think I'm done with examples. Any questions? Anything to think about so far? Oh yeah, sorry about that. One other thing, because again, this is the bit of code that demonstrated that YouTube clip. It turns out if you have that extension, you could just give it the, that base 64 kind of representation of that YouTube clip, and it will plop it nicely onto your, Sphinx website.
Yeah, generates an iframe, right?
I think so. Very good question.
When you can look at the output and see
the source. How do I get the source? Oh man, this is.
You click on the page and you right click, and it should say view source.
Oh yeah. And then there's an iframe. I guess so. Yeah, I guess you're right.
Yep.
There you go. See, so Sphinx is a black box to convert restructured text, which is what I showed in that code, into HTML. And I guess, yeah, this is HTML. This is the HTML. Yeah. But if you wanted me to, debug it at that low level, I'd be at a complete loss. I would be like, oh, it doesn't look right. Okay, let me change the markup, basically the restructured text code, so that it starts to look right. That's my interaction with it. So if there's a Sphinx bug where it can't generate, I'll be honest, I probably wouldn't be able to fix it. I'd be able to say, oh, it doesn't work, but I don't think I know enough HTML programming to change, I guess, docutils, which is a low-level module, or Sphinx, which is the higher level Python super module, to make it work. So
docutils is the rules for what to do with each type of markup,
or with restructured text. It's it has a lot of the basic rules. It's sort of the parser. I look at it, how LaTeX is its own parser and language. So you run LaTeX or PDF LaTeX on LaTeX code like scientific paper that you're writing up, and it'll
Right.
produce a PDF. There's something in DocuTools called RST to HTML that that has the same functionality. That is, you operate that on RST, restructured text files that contain restructured text code, and it generates HTML. And Sphinx is built on top of that, because instead of basically doing a bunch of RST to HTML commands, I guess it uses the parser engine to compose into nicer looking HTML. That's my, I don't know how this tool works, description of what Sphinx does.
Looks very cool.
Oop. And the final thing, because I really haven't seen this in a lot of places, or really any places, you will generate your website, right? Under build HTML, it'll have an index.html. It is a website, if it works, it's a fully self-contained functioning website. Now you can of course deploy it to your server at home, right? Your web server at home, but I figure, why the hell would you want to? I mean, you're going to use up bandwidth, looking at it. You're going to have to rely on Comcast, for instance, to not fuck up. And in the end, it could cost you, So why not just use the resources that people have made relatively available, and that you don't have to pay for, at least at the point of you can just deploy it. And if you deploy it from a machine that others control, you might not even have to pay for the deployment. So there are 4 things that I've kind of tried. Actually, 3 of the 4 I've tried. There's a thing called GitHub Pages. There's a thing called GitLab Pages, which is the same thing as GitHub Pages, except GitLab. There's a free website called Read the Docs. Actually, there's a restriction. It's free to, deploy your Sphinx documentation. It also actually builds it. If your code is public, that is, if it's not a private repository. And the 4th thing is a website you control, but in parentheses, I put in but only if you don't have to worry about bandwidth or space. So I do some of that with Sphinx websites that work, where I've actually, these are work-related Sphinx websites where I have my own sort of global directory that I own, that then goes into a website controlled, website accessible only on site or through a VPN. So I'm not going to go click on this. I guess if people want to, it's just basically say, you've got a repo, you've got, and you want to now convert it. You want to have a directory, deploy all your HTML so that it now has a URL. That's it at a high level. Oop.
Hey there, guy.
Crap. So here's sort of the mapping. This is the default way to do it. Basically following the instructions means YouTube video. For these things a while back, but then I forgot about it because I just set it up and now it just works. But the way it works by default is there's got to be a doc subdirectory, and any HTML in that doc subdirectory goes into, by default, if you don't do anything fancy, and even the non-fancy stuff is pretty kind of hairy, it'll go to your github.io/repo name. So the repo, I'm Thanim Islam, and NPR stuff is a public repo in there. So the HTML that lives in the docs directory will then be visible and, ThanimIslam.io/NPR stuff.
Hey there, guy.
So I'll just end with this thing. This is the because reasons thing. this is just idiosyncrasies of GitHub pages. It turns out the stuff to go into a public website under your name has to live in the docs subdirectory. So the general Sphinx defaults, the Sphinx source by default or by convention goes into docs, but instead you've got to put it into another directory. Oh, I think yep, this is basically in light blue. It's all that, stuff. That's basically the Sphinx website. And this is idiosyncrasy number 3 or 2. If you don't have this stupid ass .NO-Jekyll file in there, GitHub will try to generate a Jekyll website. Have any of you heard of a blogging tool or blogging framework called Jekyll? I think it's Ruby underneath the hood. But if you don't have it there, GitHub will be kind of stupid and it'll try to generate it, I guess, whenever you change stuff in the docs directory. The .NO-Jekyll says, fuck you, GitHub. No, this is a static web page. Don't do anything. Design choices. And this is a callback to, one of the first, I think, slide number 5. What this says is, okay, make sure it works. Stuff generates and builds /HTML. Once that works, you do something like a make deploy, which make sure it builds properly, copy stuff over to that docs directory from build HTML, right? That website that you generated. If this .NO-Jekyll file isn't there, it's got to regenerate it. And then these 4 things. This is then deploy, push it to the GitHub repo. And then eventually, I think it's at most a few minutes, it'll update with the latest version, just basically with the changes you've made. And finally, if people want to take a look at this, I figure there's lots of gaps. I didn't talk about everything. So I didn't talk about how to generate a sort of simple templated or straightforward templated Sphinx directory structure. A Sphinx quick start is what I start with, because you answer a few questions and it'll, for instance, generate the MAKEFILE, the CONF.PY, and the index.rst, and you can go from there. There's a main Sphinx website. Let me click on that. Actually, Woody, you've got the icon, I guess, so you know where that lives.
Yep, Google Images, yay.
Yes, exactly. Bullet number 3 with the subbullet, I really don't recommend if you're starting out. Like if you've never seen restructured text, do not go to this restructured text website, and I'm not going to click on that because it's like an RFC basically. You're gonna be very confused if you go into having seen restructured text before. And I do this all the time. The final bullet is there are lots of bits and pieces, and so the process of generating new Sphinx documentation is less making it from scratch than grafting. You've got a forest and you've got to copy over some trees or saplings, and you just take bits and pieces that are in there and copy it over into your new Sphinx documentation website or Sphinx documentation source directory, and go from there. I find that's a lot more useful. And so if you want to go move forward, I invite you to take a look at the actual Sphinx code that I have in those projects, because I definitely use it all the time, and I figure it might give you some useful suggestions on what you might want to do if you choose to do Sphinx documentation yourselves. And with that, anything else you guys want to talk about or have me talk about in some more detail, or anybody want a copy of this, for instance?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I figure it's not a deep dive into code. The deep dive is basically, okay, look at this website, and here's the actual code that was used to generate it. Make HTML to generate the website itself. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That conceptually, there are other details, but that's the flow of iterating on and filling in documentation.
All right, so bonus points if anyone speaks in the future and uses that to create a website describing what they've built. All right, we have any other questions for Taneem on the topic today? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I'm just wondering how different restructured text is from Markdown, from like, GitHub style Markdown.
It's more verbose. It's, I guess there's more grammar and syntax with it. It's generally harder to do for similar stuff. For instance, if you want to create, for instance, a bulleted list, it's the same level of difficulty. There's stuff you can do in restructured text by default that you can't necessarily do in Markdown. For instance, LaTeX, which might not be a big issue. One of the killer features is creating tables. There is in restructured text a directive syntax called list tables. So if you try to create tables in Markdown, right, you've got to actually spit out each cell. I think that's the way to do it. With restructured text, there's a thing called list tables, and let me see if I can find anything like that. Is where you could have however many columns, however wide they are, and it's just a very it's easier for me to show rather than tell. I think. How do I? And I'm going to eat my own dog food. By that I mean I'm going to. Let's see if there's anything in here called this table, this repository. Yep. I guess, let's go to, so the thing is, you see, for me, it's got a very elegant syntax. You see this list table here? You of course give it by default, you set it to be auto width. But in Markdown, for instance, you'd have to create, here's the lines representing the, 2 columns. And then, okay, here's the 4 cells you've got to put in here. In this case, the structure is a lot neater. For instance, this says, okay, this is a row. These are the separate cells in those columns. And you can have, however many like that. And that's a problem I've seen with Markdown, or even with the crappier version of restructured text, which has the same kind of syntax as Markdown does, is that, oh no, actually, instead of 5 columns, I wanted 7. And then it's a big fuck you to me in the old way of, oh, I've got to actually reformat, every one of those columns. And what if, there's a lot of text? There's no way to do a break. It's gonna take all the space, all that space. With this one, you can actually, type however much you want to type, and it'll be fine. You can even do proper line breaks and things like that, and it'll work. And so this is sort of a a killer feature that it has. There's I don't know if Markdown has a way to do general references, maybe some flavors of it do. The restructured text has that specification, for instance.
Like links to other pages or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it turns out with Markdown, the biggest problem I found, each flavor of Markdown is pretty easy to get started, but my biggest gripe with it is which flavor of Markdown are people talking about when they refer to Markdown? And there's multiple, only a myriad ones of Markdown. With restructured text, it's sort of, a lot of the stuff is more complicated, but there's one restructured text specification. And you follow it and it'll generate nicely in Sphinx, or it's supposed to. And there's like standard ways of doing references and links and things like that.
Very cool. Anything else? Awesome. Well, this will be on YouTube. If anyone wants to follow up with questions, you can comment there. You can find us in Slack. You can find us in the Discord. Taneem, I know to be incredibly responsive. So yeah, Taneem, thanks once again for volunteering your time and showing us yet another cool bit of code that you're working with. I think I'm probably actually going to use that one because it turns out documentation is useful.
I've gotten sort of a charm school input from my group leader about somebody, made a comment at one of the workshops about how do we get people to actually use the code we develop. So I just threw a grenade in there. So is there a Sphinx documented website you have for the code that you've developed? No, then why should I listen to you?
Okay.
So yeah, so yes, I highly recommend it. I'm of the philosophy, if nobody understands your, does it mean you've actually written it?
Oh yeah.
Nobody can use your code, yeah.
You're like, what is that? Schrodinger's code? Like,
or a tree falling in the forest, right?
Yeah. If no one can understand it, is it real?
Is it real? Does it actually, have you actually written it? Have you actually coded it up?
Okay. That's some rigor right there. All right. Well, if anybody is looking to present something, they got some release they got coming up and need to practice talking to some board, feel free to come practice. You can reach out also on the chat channels. I can be reached on email as well, in the meetup and all that. I'm working on getting the author of Python in a Nutshell, Alex Martelli. Ran into him at a company I used to work with and befriended him. And so I've been talking to him recently and hopefully we can get him on. But if anyone else has got something they want to talk about, please feel free to reach out and we'll get you on. All right, we got a mailing list too. Screenshot that if you're interested. We haven't really done a whole lot with it yet. All right, before we log off, is there anyone who'd like to share anything with the group? We've got 45 more minutes blocked out, but there's no reason we need to use all of that. Speak now or forever hold your peace. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. It's another good one. We'll see you guys back first Thursday of September. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you all later.
See you guys.